There was a time a man could vanish into the woods with nothing but a knife and come back alive. That knowledge didn't disappear. It got buried under 100 years of convenience. I'm Ezra Hawk. This isn't nostalgia, it's survival. Right now, somewhere in your house, there's a gadget that cost you $300-400 and does something a frontier family did for free with a rock they picked up off the ground. Today, I'm going through 12 of them, one at a time, and I'm not just going to tell you the trick. I'm going to walk you through exactly why it worked and exactly where the modern version quietly fails. Some of these will make you laugh. Some of them might genuinely change what's sitting in your bug-out bag by the end of this video. Stick around for the last few. They're the comparisons that surprised me the most when I started digging into this. Picture a frontier cabin in the mountains, first hard freeze of the season. No matches, matches were expensive, and a wet pocket could ruin a whole box in seconds anyway. What every family kept instead was simple: a piece of flint, a steel striker, and a small tin of char cloth tucked close to the body to keep it dry. Strike steel against flint at the right angle, and you're not making fire directly. You're shaving off tiny fragments of metal that ignite in the air from friction and oxidation. Those sparks aren't hot enough on their own to catch dry tinder. They have to land in char cloth first, a scorched fabric prepared ahead of time that catches even a modest spark and turns it into a slow, glowing ember you can then nurse into flame. That's the trade-off worth being honest about. Char cloth is genuinely sensitive to moisture, so this method actually asks more of you in wet weather, not less. Keeping the char cloth bone dry, usually in a sealed tin close to the body, was exactly the kind of quiet daily discipline frontier survival depended on. Modern arc lighters look incredible on camera. A crackling blue line of plasma, no fuel, no flame to blow out in the wind, but they run on a rechargeable battery, and lithium batteries lose a real, measurable chunk of their usable capacity in cold weather, typically 20 to 30% near freezing, and more in extreme cold, which happens to be exactly the condition you most need fire. Leave one in a cold pack overnight, and there's a real chance it won't have the charge to strike when you need it most. Manufacturers will tell you to keep it warm, close to your body, which is good advice, except it means the device now depends on you doing something extra just to keep it functional. Neither tool gets a free pass here. The arc lighter fails when its battery runs cold and empty. The flint and steel fails when its char cloth runs damp. The real advantage of the old method isn't that it's immune to weather. It's that keeping a tin of char cloth dry is something you can control with nothing but a pocket, where a dead battery has no such workaround in the field. Transition line. And fire's only half the problem. The other half is what frontier families did the moment they found water. Because finding it and being able to safely drink it were two very different things. Layers of coarse gravel, fine sand, and charred wood packed into a hollowed log or a stack of stones. Water poured and murky came out clear on the other side, and it wasn't just about appearance. The charcoal layer did something particularly useful. It absorbed a surprising number of impurities and organic contaminants as water passed through its porous surface, trapping them in a way that plain sand or cloth couldn't manage on its own. It's the same basic principle taught in survival courses today because the physics never stopped working. Building one took maybe 20 minutes with materials already lying around a campsite. No moving parts, no seals to fail, no maintenance beyond scraping off and replacing the top layer of charcoal every so often once it stopped doing its job as well. A UV purifier pen neutralizes pathogens by scrambling their DNA with ultraviolet light when it's charged and when it hasn't been dropped, and when the batteries haven't corroded in your pack for 8 months. The moment any one of those fails, you're holding an expensive plastic wand and nothing else. It's also a device that requires the water to already be reasonably clear. Heavy sediment can shield pathogens from the UV light entirely, meaning a murky creek might defeat it even with a full charge. The layered stone filter handles the sediment problem as a byproduct of doing its actual job. The layered stone filter has no failure mode except running out of materials, and the materials are lying on the ground around you. Fire and water get you through a night. What got a family through an entire winter was something a lot less glamorous and a lot heavier. 2 flat stones, a stationary base, and a hand-turned upper stone, ground wheat, corn, and other grain into flour, 1 handful at a time, day after day. It was slow, repetitive work, often done by whoever in the household had the hour to spare, and it was frequently the first chore handed to the youngest capable member of the family. A good set of quern stones could realistically outlast the people who use them. Stone wears down far slower than any mechanical part, and surviving examples are often genuine multi-generation heirlooms. There was nothing to break, nothing to wear out beyond the stone surface itself, which took a very long time to wear smooth enough to need attention. An electric mill turns the same job into 30 seconds of noise until the motor burns out, a part cracks, or the power simply isn't there. When that happens, the mill is dead weight sitting on a counter, and most owners have no way to repair the internal motor themselves. The quern stone was never waiting on electricity in the first place. It only ever needed someone willing to turn it, and it never once asked for a repair in its entire working life. Every one of these tools depended on something else, too. A blade sharp enough to actually get the job done, 1 stone, a little water or oil, and a technique passed down by watching someone else do it 1,000 times before you tried it yourself. Frontier men kept a working edge on the same knife for decades, using nothing but a flat stone and their own hands. The angle mattered more than the tool. A patient hand on a plain stone could put an edge on a blade sharp enough to split a hair, and could do it again and again for as long as there was stone left to work with. It was a skill measured in feel, not in numbers on a dial. These systems are genuinely precise when the belts and guides are in good condition, but those parts wear down, need replacing, and are often the first thing to fail when a tool sits unused in storage for a season, exactly the situation you'd be in if you only pulled it out for an emergency. A sharpening stone doesn't have parts to fail. It just wears down slowly and evenly across an entire lifetime of use. And even a worn stone can usually be flattened and put back into service. A sharp knife matters most when there's meat to preserve. And that's where frontier families solved a problem we still haven't fully beaten with electricity. Dig into the earth, line the walls with stone, and you get something remarkable. A space that holds a steady, cool temperature through every season, because stone and soil are extraordinarily good at buffering temperature swings from the surface above. Frontier families kept meat, root vegetables, and preserves edible for months this way, sometimes into the following year. The cellar didn't need tending beyond checking on what was stored inside it, and it kept working exactly the same whether the family was home or away for weeks at a time. A deep freezer is more convenient on a good day, until the power goes out. Then the countdown starts immediately, and everything inside is at meaningful risk within hours, not days, especially in warmer climates where a freezer's contents can begin thawing well before power is restored. The stone root cellar has no countdown. It doesn't know or care whether the grid is up because it was never connected to it in the first place. And when everything else goes wrong, when you're the one who needs finding, frontier families had an answer for that too. A flat piece of stone or glass, polished smooth and angled just right, can throw a flash of reflected sunlight visible for miles, far enough to catch the eye of a search party on the ground or a passing aircraft overhead. It takes 0 technology, 0 charge, and 0 moving parts. Just sunlight, a steady hand, and the right angle, which most people could learn to aim well in a matter of minutes of practice. A GPS beacon is extraordinary when it works. Satellite connection, exact coordinates transmitted, rescue on the way. But a dead battery, a lost satellite lock under heavy canopy, or a cracked screen leaves you holding an expensive brick at the worst possible time. The signal mirror keeps working as long as the sun's in the sky, which, historically, has been a fairly safe bet to make. Getting found matters, but before that, you need to know which direction you're even walking in, and that's a problem frontier families solved without a single satellite. Plant a straight stick upright in open ground, mark the tip of its shadow, wait a short while, and mark it again. The line between those 2 marks runs roughly east to west. It's a method a child could learn in a single afternoon and use for the rest of their life without ever needing to relearn it. At night, the North Star held steady overhead while everything else in the sky wheeled slowly around it, giving a fixed point frontier travelers could walk toward for hours without a single tool in hand and without any risk of it ever running out of power. A GPS unit is faster and more precise, right up until a dead battery, a software glitch, or simply losing satellite signal in a canyon or under heavy tree cover leaves you exactly as lost as before, except now you were relying on something that just failed you at the moment you needed it most. The shadow stick and the North Star never lose signal because there was never a signal to lose in the first place. Knowing where you're going matters. Staying fed and warm long enough to get there matters just as much. Long before metal pots were common on the frontier, families boiled water and cooked stews by heating stones in a fire until they glowed, then dropping them directly into a container of water using sticks or tongs. Often a tightly woven basket or a hollowed piece of wood that could hold water without ever touching open flame. Each stone transferred its heat into the water on contact, and a few rounds of hot stones were often enough to bring a full container to a rolling boil. No metal cookware required at all, a technique that worked anywhere. There was a fire and stones that could take the heat. An electric kettle is fast and effortless, as long as there's a working outlet nearby. Take away the grid, and it's an inert object with no way to do the one thing it was built for, no matter how well designed it is otherwise. Hot rock boiling only ever needed a fire and stones that could take the heat without cracking, both of which are usually close at hand outdoors, no supply chain required. And staying fed and hydrated means nothing if you can't also keep the insects and pests away from what you've stored, which was its own daily battle. A low, smoldering fire built from green wood or specific bundled herbs produced thick smoke that frontier families used to drive mosquitoes and biting insects away from a campsite or a doorway for hours at a time. The right materials, often plants with naturally strong-smelling oils, made the smoke even more effective, and the technique required nothing but a small fire kept deliberately smoky rather than left to burn clean and hot. Electric zappers and plug-in repellent devices work well in a fixed location with power, but they're useless the moment you're away from an outlet, which is precisely when insects tend to be the biggest problem, out in the field rather than indoors. A smudge fire travels with you. It needs a fire and the right kindling, and both of those have always been available in the same places people actually needed protection. Staying comfortable outdoors is one thing. Staying warm through a genuinely brutal winter night is a completely different level of problem, and one frontier builders solved right into the walls of their homes. Frontier builders who had access to stone often built fireplaces and even entire walls with it deliberately, because stone absorbs heat slowly through the day and releases it slowly through the night. Evening out, the temperature swings that would otherwise leave a cabin freezing by early morning. A well-built stone hearth could stay warm to the touch for hours after the fire inside had burned down to embers, radiating heat into a room long after the flames themselves had gone quiet. A space heater puts out heat instantly and can be moved anywhere, but it stops producing anything at all the second the power cuts out, which tends to happen in exactly the kind of severe winter weather that made you need extra heat in the first place. Stone thermal mass doesn't generate its own heat, but it stores and releases what you already have far more efficiently than empty air ever could, and it keeps doing that job with or without electricity. Heat and shelter get you through the night, but surviving out there long-term also meant being able to cut and process heavy wood, not just gather kindling. Before steel axes were common or affordable for every household, a well-shaped stone head, hafted tightly to a wooden handle, could still fell smaller trees, split kindling, and process game with real efficiency in practiced hands. The technique relied on understanding the grain of the wood and letting the weight of the tool do the work, rather than brute force alone. A stone head, properly shaped, held an edge surprisingly well for the jobs it was actually used for. A chainsaw is dramatically faster for heavy wood processing when it's fueled or charged, when the chain is properly tensioned, and when nothing in its many moving parts has jammed or dulled. Any one of those failure points can turn it into an unusable weight in your hands. The stone hand axe has exactly one part, and that part doesn't jam, run out of fuel, or need a chain replaced. And once the sun goes down after a full day of work, there's one more problem Frontier families solved without ever flipping a switch. A stone-lined hearth doesn't just hold warmth, it reflects and holds firelight too, brightening a room far more than an open flame alone would manage in a plain dirt floor space. Combined with a simple oil lamp, often just a wick set in a stone or shell holding rendered fat or oil, Frontier families had reliable light that lasted as long as they had fuel to spare. These lamps needed almost no maintenance. Trim the wick occasionally, keep the reservoir filled, and the light was there every single night without fail, for as long as anyone could remember using them. Modern rechargeable lanterns are brighter and more convenient by far, until the charge runs out during an extended outage, and there's no way to refill them without the very power source they were meant to replace. An oil lamp only ever needs fuel, and fuel, unlike a charging cable and a working outlet, has always been something people could render, trade for, or store in bulk well ahead of time. None of this means throw away your gear. Good tools are good tools, and most of us aren't giving up electricity anytime soon. But every single trick on this list worked without a battery, a charge port, or a warranty. And that's worth remembering, because the day your gadget dies is exactly the day you'll wish you knew the trick that never can. 12 tools, 12 rocks. Every one of them still works exactly the way it did 200 years ago. And every one of the gadgets we replaced them with has a battery, a part, or a signal standing between you and the thing you actually need. That's the forgotten frontier. If this one hit different, there's more where it came from. I'll see you in the next one.